So good afternoon, everyone. A heartfelt welcome to our esteemed panelists and all of you attending the FinSec Conclave 2023. Now we are here for captivating discussion on security operations and governance, especially focusing on threat modeling, trust, and privacy trade-off. Without further delay, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists, speakers who will be leading the session. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mukesh Chandra Mohan, CISO at Aditya Birla Finance. Mr. Manikant, CISO, DMI Finance, and Mr. Ganesh AR, CISO at ICICI Bank, who will be moderating this session. Welcome, sir. Over to you, Ganesh.
Thanks, Akshay, and good evening, everyone. So I know that it is the last day of the event under Friday as well, and an evening session. So we wouldn't want to kind of stand between you and the rest of the evening. So just to start with, as the topic says, security operations and governance, threat modeling and privacy trade-offs. So just to start with, meaning we all know that as security operations at different scale and different levels, all of us have been running. So I mean, for literally forever, ever since this industry probably started, or ever since everything started becoming electronic and digital, this is something that has always been there. And to an extent that in the eyes of some of the traditional regulators or some of the people who look at it, I would say that maybe 10 years back, if somebody has to say that we are having an information security group, people will immediately think that, okay, fine, as long as you have a security operations center, few people looking at a few screens, I think that means you have something. So meaning that is the end of it. So from there, I think we have come a long, long way. So it is not about just a few people monitoring or just a few people staying on top of whatever we are doing, but it is much, much more than that. And that is basically what we would like to kind of touch upon and discuss today. And just to give in fact, before we actually came here, we were also having a bit of a chat around what we should cover, etc. So one of the things that comes up is that security operations governance as the topic goes. So to my mind, at least, I am of the very strong opinion that the governance part is, in a way, should come after. We should do security operations for what is needed for the business. At the end of the day, the regulator and governance is something that if you do a good job of what is needed for your business, I think your regulatory aspects will automatically get taken care of. Whereas in certain other contexts, or unfortunately in certain parts of the industry, people get heavily driven by regulation and then kind of become almost obsessed with it. And at least in my personal humble opinion, I think that is probably not the way to go. I think we are doing, or we should be doing whatever we are doing for protecting our business, for taking care of risks that are specific to our context. And I think if we do that, then we should be in a position to stand up to any regulator and then say that, boss, I am doing what is right for the business. And in addition, of course, I am taking care of whatever is needed for regulation. And particularly in the financial services context, in India, I can say with a lot of what you call comfort and confidence and authority that the moment we adopt this approach, we have always seen that our regulator, particularly when we deal with regulation, for us, it is of course RBI as the primary this one. Our regulator, I think, has been extremely receptive, extremely reasonable. So I think it is probably, as security practitioners, it is our responsibility to kind of put our risk and our business in front of everything else, and then kind of make sure that our security operations and governance is right on top of what is needed to protect the business. And when we have this conversation, at least in our experience as a bank, in our experience, and of course, and you all will know that when RBI looks at us, they look at us as with a very, very different lens, because being a part of the 3 DSIBs in the country, so the standards that they kind of lay down for us, or the standards at which they expect us to do, is very, very different from what they look at from any other regulated entity. So even with that, We have always felt that when you have this approach and when you are kind of solidly on top of handling your risks, you are definitely able to reason out, and then that way RBI, particularly this arm of RBI, has been a phenomenally supportive and phenomenally reasonable regulator. That is something that I think we should kind of keep at the back of our mind, that first our business and our risks come on top of it. It has to be a risk conversation more than a regulation conversation, because regulation is kind of there are two ways to look at regulation. One, of course, it is something which anyway you have to meet. Whether you like it or not, it has to meet. You have to meet it. The other way to look at it is what is paramount is taking care of our risks. And if we do that, automatically regulation will get taken care of. So that is, plus of course, as we start our discussions, this is an area which has also evolved a lot. I will start by asking my co-panelists on basically what is it that they have seen in their experience in this particular area evolve, and particularly what is it that they are seeing in terms of what are the current contexts in which this is evolving, particularly over the last couple of years as we come out of the pandemic, as we come out of this whole thing of almost a continuous, this one of hybrid working to be here to stay, and what we look at in terms of the recent threat landscape, and how we look at this area. And in their opinion, in the opinion of both Makesh and Manikant, what is it that they see in terms of how this area will pan out over the next few years? And as practitioners, what are the things that we should really keep in mind when we look at the evolution of this area over the next few years? Maybe we will start off with Makesh.
Thank you so much, Ganesh. So I think nice narrative which spoke about where the security operations started and where we are today. If you see historically, I think security operations were driven by compliance and regulations in the past. But I think slowly what is happening right now is like the gap between the regulations and the risk and threat landscape alignment is coming very closer. So as Ganesh mentioned, I think the need of looking at regulations and compliance as a separate angle is not required at this point in time. More of if you concentrate on the business risk which is getting evolved out of this technology and the technology platforms, I think that is sufficient for organization to mitigate any kind of risk from the cyber. Personally, I think security operations is very close to my mind. And it's one of the key KRA which I define for myself as a cybersecurity professional in the organization. Over the period of time, if you see, the organizations are maturing, right? So it is no more a security team's responsibility. Now more and more now security operations are dwelling with technology, non-technology, connected devices, operational technologies. All are getting interlinked right now, along with the new age digitalization, which is also fueling the new set of alerts through the Security Operations Center. And especially while you look at it, most of the organizations which are breached has lot of technologies to detect and prevent. In addition to that, it also has a very robust security operations center along with the process and technology. But if you see why it got failed in terms of detection and prevention, in most of the cases, we would have seen there is no right set of awareness with the organization functions, where they don't know exactly to whom to approach when there is an incident, till what level they can manage as a BAU and what level they have to escalate. So in my view, I think CISOs has to drive this clearly with all the stakeholders, not only with security operations team, where they have to clearly communicate about RACI matrix in terms of who has to do what, and that clarity has to be very clearly defined as a part of a playbook. and that has to be executed very frequently to become a part of a daily routine. Otherwise, people tend to forget it if it is kept as a document to be reviewed once in a year. And in today's context, if you see, because of new compliance requirements and the threat landscape, which has increased drastically because of digitalization, you would have seen a huge magnitude of increased number of log sources which are getting integrated with security operation centers. And because of which there is a clear alert fatigue which is there. There are challenges of human intervention and interpretation of those logs and the incidences, because it doesn't require incidences to be based on Boolean expression. It has to be with a lot of contextual understanding in terms of what it means to the business and what it is going to be related to the business risk. So I think continuous evolvement and continuous education and awareness is a must for the teams, including technology, including operations, including management. And that's how we need to deal with security operations. From the governance perspective, yes, there is a lot of improvement which has happened for regulated entities. But if you see, still non-regulated entities are going through a very tough time. I think in one of the conversation in the morning, I think few organizations were representing in front of a semi-government entity to talk about how they are struggling in terms of actually getting skilled resources or support resources to do their security operations. Because of the size of the organization, they cannot afford to have a very dedicated SOC and a security around it. So still there is a lot of challenge around it, but I feel, I think reasonably we have evolved in last few years, especially post-pandemic. I think we are in a stage where we can say that we are going in the right direction. We have to just speeden up because of the digitalization which is happening in a very faster phase. Thank you.
Thanks, Makesh, for that kind of perspective. So I would now hand it over to Manikant for his perspectives on this.
So, from a NBFC or perspective, as you clearly said, there were guys who were sitting on in front of couple of monitors, and they were monitoring, and they would get a bar chart or a pie chart which would decide whether to take an action or that. Today, there has been a lot of traction against security operations. One is the question of giving a Boolean or a binary answer, yes and no. People are moved ahead and thinking about how to improvise the standards. There are people have started moving into many international standards like NIST, how to identify, analyze, and take action. Besides this entire security operations, which were never looked at as a value addition, it was only looked at only it's a cost center. Now business has taken a call that these could impact their businesses in case of an event or an incident. So this entire security operations have started coming into the limelight of the business. So if there is an alert which has to be informed to the business or to the operations, it has become more relevant. Second point which I would like to emphasize is there has been a lot of evolution about it. Now people talk about artificial intelligence taking over the level 1 kind of job, or kind of, personally I don't see anything replacing anything, but over the period when things like ChatGPT or something which is going to predominantly bring up changes and revolution, and to enhance the models to ensure that these operations can be optimized or going to be future. Currently, there is a lot of discussion over the internet about the human centricity, about who will decide what, whether it has to be flagged to the company or whether it has to be not to flag, is all getting more mature and mature day by day, which will again, it depends upon to the organization how they ensure their compliance with their regulators. That's what I'm saying.
Good. Thanks, Manikant. Kind of as we move from a traditional security operations, which I think is reasonably standard and reasonably well settled in a lot of organizations, as we look at threat modeling, because this is a kind of a buzzword or something that we have been hearing for quite some time. Particularly, it is becoming even more frequently heard of late. So the next area that probably I would want to discuss is around what is your views on one. Of course, I think all of us agree that yes, threat modeling is important, but when it comes to practically putting it in practice, especially in an organization, and we are all of different sizes, different skills, different this ones, how practical it is, how feasible it is, and in from your experience, how much of it is, let's say, completely doable within the kind of organizations with the kind of skills that we run? Because at the end of the day, we are all, meaning, we are not necessarily a security research company. We are, let's say, we are a bank, we are an NBFC, we have a, that is what is our primary business. So security is a means for our business to kind of be protected and our business to be taken care of. So it's not necessarily only our main business. So that being the case, how practical it is, meaning one can talk about, let's say, the whole gamut of threat modeling, everything and all of that, almost to the point of, let's say, what one can do a PhD. But what I would like to pick Makesh and Manikant's brains is on how much is it feasible, what is the right balance between, let's say, doing a lot of threat modeling ourselves inside our organizations or leveraging the products that we buy which have some of these capabilities inside nowadays. And in that case, how reliable are those in terms of can we go by whatever, let's say, the threat modeling or that kind of an output that you get from a product? And if you go by that, then will you be missing out something else? So these kind of questions is what we always get worried about, right? So in terms of when I go with some product or when I go with a particular approach, so what is it that I'm missing? So this is something that, this is one answer which is always very, very difficult. We always get worried only about that. I think in security, most often, we are not worried about what we are actually looking at or what is coming up in front of us. We are more worried about what we are missing. So from that angle, how does threat modeling work in their experience, particularly in practice? How much of it is practical? How much of it can be done in-house? How much of it we need to leverage external expertise or external products? So I just want to pick your brains. Maybe we'll start with you, Makesh.
Again, very, very good point, Ganesh. I don't think we can 100% do threat modeling all the time. And one of the biggest challenge which I see is like, it starts from identification of the assets, right? All said and done, we all can say that we have a CMDB, we have a clear asset inventory and everything. But especially post-pandemic, when you have most complex environment created by having multiple on-premises data centers, multiple cloud environments, multiple tenancy, and when you have multiple organizations under one conglomerate head, then you create all the more complexity attached to it, having single subscription, multiple subscription. So visibility is one of the biggest challenges to start with the continuous effort on the threat modeling. Second is like very, very detailed threat modeling takes lot of time and effort, and it's not just plain vanilla technology implementation. It requires a lot of manual efforts. It requires a lot of understanding at various layers in terms of application, in terms of data, in terms of infrastructure. What is the context of that application and what is the purpose from the business perspective, and a lot more attached to it, right? So it becomes very, very challenging. While we all know that there is no alternate for that if you want to really build context-based security operations where we want to really look through what is applicable to me, what is applicable to that particular business, then obviously I think we need to conduct threat modeling in a very effective way. So though it is going to be slightly delayed and time consuming, but I feel from my perspective, it's very, very important to do it to ensure you attach the context and you really look through what is important to you and your organization from the risk perspective. From technology perspective, I don't think any single technology which provides this kind of threat modeling, at least to my knowledge, because there are a lot of limitations in technology when you look at threat modeling. But if you put this as a process and if you make a governance around it, I feel it is possible to implement, and it is very important to keep that so that we are focused on what is required for the organization.
Thanks, Makesh. See, the other point that I was thinking as Makesh was speaking was maybe that's something that you can also touch upon. Is will it also make sense for, let's say, a larger apex body like a FinCERT or whatever it is to look at threat modeling for a sector instead of, let's say, all of us doing it? Meaning, some of us will do it in any which way for our own context or our own assets, but given the fact that there will be more data, there will be more this one available, and kind of it will become easier if you can consolidate it across multiple entities and then be kind of able to provide it as a service. Maybe that's a thought that one should probably approach or broach with our some of our sectoral entities, kind of umbrella entities, that, and particularly now that some of these things are becoming commonly coming under, let's say, NCI, APC kind of this one. So that is also maybe something that I would want to take your views on.
Oh, I completely agree with you, Ganesh and Mukesh. The entire threat modeling revolves around asset discovery. You analyze the threat, and then you need to contain it. The entire model, the entire basis of model is something has to be designed, something has to be, prepared by somebody. So the entire threat modeling is not so easy, and every business is unique and different. With the explosion of data across the businesses and applications widespread in an enterprise, it's not so easy to develop a single model which will work for every other organization. So threat modeling is based on the complexity of an organization, and as you said, the volume, the more the volume, the more complexity. So it's so difficult to build the model, to run it, to analyze, to segregate, and to deploy or contain. So in my view, what you said is getting feed from FinCERT or something is actually a very valid proposition. But again, what threat which comes to for me may not be actually relevant for another organization. So it is going to take some time to segregate about MSME or an enterprise, about which needs to go where. It's going to take some time, but again, it's a very valid point which you have raised, which needs to be taken care in future. And second thing which I would like to touch about threat modeling is the lack of expertise usually. We don't have real great experts to understand the model and interpret it. So again, there are some experts. You need to get experts to work on those models, and either you outsource it actually. You cannot keep an expert inside, and of course, it depends upon the bandwidth of the organization. So it is, as of now, I still see that threat modeling is actually a complex environment which needs to be internally taken off.
Yeah, that's the expert part of it is a good point. I used to, meaning I'm reminded of some of the conversations that we have had with our regulator in terms of this forensic expertise. Should you have it inside or outside? Meaning, and don't quote me outside this room, but sometimes we used to have this one. In fact, there is an expectation that you should build forensic expertise inside the organization. I always used to push back saying that no, that is not something that is rightfully built inside the organization, because ideally I wouldn't want that fellow to be busy, because if that fellow is busy, then there is some serious problem with me. But if he is not busy, then he is going to be rusting. So he is not going to be useful after 6 months. So what do you do? So this is a conversation that we always used to have. So with the regulator also, sometimes it's a very difficult conversation, because that is exactly what I'm reminded of when he's talking about expertise. It's exactly like that. I mean, you can't have all the expertise inside, but at the same time, some of this you probably need to establish that right balance. So thanks for that, Manikant. So then, meaning probably we'll wind up with the next question. So what?
I think that's a very valid point, Ganesh. I think things are changing really. If you see some of the recent regulations, which clearly talks about adapting vCISO as part of the strategy, because if you see 2012 10, I think the NIST has clearly defined the requirement of vCISO, which can be adopted by the US organizations. I think though it is little late, I think we have realized the requirement of internal skill sets, the availability. And I think slowly, I think things are materializing. People are realizing there is a skill shortage. And I think organizations should have freedom to choose taking partners on their side to meet their end objective rather than telling that it has to be internal or it has to be internal. So likewise, I think threat modeling also needs to be partnered with external people, but external people alone can't bring that value to the table because I have seen people, though they have experienced working with certain organizations, certain sectors, still they were not able to bring the real threat out of their understanding because it requires a lot of business context. It requires a lot of your internal information to be understood. So it has to be partnered by both internal as well as with the partner ecosystem.
No, no, well, meaning absolutely well said. It's almost like the family doctor. No, you want a family doctor, but you don't want that doctor to treat only you, because otherwise you will never gain experience. No, so so it's almost like that. So just moving on, I'm conscious of time. So maybe the other part of the topic was about the whole this one of trust versus privacy. And as organizations, of course, we all like to collect a lot of data from our customers. We all like to know more and more about our customers. We all like to know more and more about what is happening, what our customers are doing, either with us or outside, or what our employees are doing. But that always has a trade-off between what you can do with that data vis-a-vis what kind of, how much you impinge on somebody else's privacy as an individual or as a citizen. So this is always a big this one. And I just want to probably just get some thoughts from both of you. Maybe we'll start with you on where do you see this going? Of course, the bill is around the corner. I mean, it has been around the corner for some time. But bill or no bill, but where do you really see this going? And especially, how do we have to kind of, what is it that is like, I mean, what is it that you are seeing as going? And two, we also probably have to have some sense about what is it that, let's say, the rest of the business will have to do vis-a-vis what is it that, let's say, the InfoSec practitioners will have to do, because there are some lines to be drawn here. So I just want to probably take some thoughts from both of you. We'll start with you.
So in the interest of time, I'll just say two things. One is the entire privacy is just not an InfoSec responsibility. It is more of a business and InfoSec. There's a very thin line drawn between both the parties. Second thing is, as I said, how do we go forward? The entire organization cannot put the blame of privacy only to InfoSec. Every data moving, evolving inside the organization, every person is actually a stakeholder for the privacy. So just only pointing towards one department as InfoSec or a technology department is actually going to be a catastrophe for the organization. So it is going to be, until the bill is out, we cannot presume this is going to happen. But in my view, this is going to take some time for the organization to understand that privacy is not a single person's responsibility, it is a group responsibility.
Good. That's a good one, Manik. Makesh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel one and the same because privacy is a business responsibility, and the risk is a business risk. Where CISO will play a role is about securing the information which we are collecting, and the business has to play a role of clearly defining the purpose and intent of collection and how it is going to be used and how it is going to be disclosed to the person who is intended to give that data. So from security perspective, if you see, there are certain impacts which we can expect, especially when privacy bill is going to be around the corner, because that is applicable not only for customer data, it is applicable to any PI information which you might be collecting, storing, and looking at. including your own employees and your own partners, vendors, whatever it is. Uh, but I think there are ways and means which we have to work out, and easily the trade-off can be made, and it can be transparent enough to ensure that nothing is belittled by the other one. So we have to be cognizant about it, and we have to be very transparent about it. That's my view. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Makesh. And I think we probably are coming down to the end of this one. Thanks a lot for your thoughts. And maybe before we wind up, if there are any audience questions, we can take for a few minutes, depending on whatever time Akshay allows us.
Mike.
Hi, I'm Sanket from Zeron. So I have a question. This topic is security, operations, and governance, right? So governance is inside the organization as well. What is the change that you have seen over the years with respect to the top management who are not involved in security, getting into the governance of what is going on in the security? Like what it was 3 years back and what it's right now. Like the board asking about things going on in the security. So has there been a change on that part as well?
I think there is a drastic change. I have to be very clear in this. There are slight difference in terms of what regulated entities are experiencing and what non-regulated entities are going through. But to be honest, in last 2 years, if you see even non-regulated entities like manufacturing and other industries, which are little less sensitive towards that, has really got into action, because they have really seen by industrial 4 revolution, where they are talking about complete digitalization across their production flows, where everything is going to be connected, and they have realized that the threat is not a myth, right? It is a real, it is hitting. Every day some manufacturing firm is getting breached. It is having a production impact, right? Where they have really touched the nerves of the business. So they have realized, and I would say that most of the boards are right now conscious about it, and they are very sensitive. In fact, I think I would talk on behalf of most of the regulated entities. It is kept as a part of an agenda on our quarterly board meetings, right? So the discussions are very intensive. Sometimes they ask very speculative questions, uncomfortable questions, uh, but with all good intentions. At the end of the day, I think, as I told, transparency has to be kept, and consciously we have to deal with such threats. And definitely there is a huge improvement which I am seeing over last few years. Thank you.
Questions? No questions, sir. Thank you so much, panelists, for your valuable insights.